So before you even start shooting, the first thing you want to do is you want to go out and scout your locations. Location scouting is really important because it allows you to go out there and see what you're going to shoot beforehand. I know for myself, I like to look for a lot of different things when I'm out scouting. One, besides from weather conditions, is what kind of wildlife's in the area. If you're shooting anywhere around birds or scurrying animals like squirrels, those are going to get in your shot and ultimately ruin your time lapse, so you really want to make sure that you avoid those. And that's why scouting is super important. There's a lot of different elements that can really ruin your time lapse. People, cars, wildlife, all those things come into a factor, and that's why you usually want to use ND filters when you're out shooting, because you can do what's called dragging the shutter. And dragging the shutter gives you basically what's a long exposure when you're shooting your time lapse, so it's going to blur out all of those little elements. So you can blur out the cars, you can blur out the people, you can blur out the wildlife, and it just makes your shot look so much more cinematic. And that's ultimately what we want to look for when we are shooting time lapse. Other things when you're out scouting is you want to make sure the location that you're scouting is open. Just on this trip alone, we've gone to a couple different locations, and due to snow or just due to the weather, locations have been closed. So, we were prepared to shoot, but we got to the location and just ultimately we couldn't shoot because we just weren't allowed in there. So that's why it's always important to go out there and scout and just make sure that the area that you want to shoot in is ready for shooting. One of the best tips I can offer when you're out location scouting, whether that's for wildlife landscapes or city vistas, is to not settle for a composition or a location that doesn't yield what you want. There's been many times that I've been offered really epic locations to shoot from, but the elements in the scene just really wouldn't amount to a great time lapse. Unless you're under contract to shoot a specific subject, take care when it comes to your setup locations. If the scene doesn't offer you anything to time lapse, aka there's no clouds, there's no people, there's nothing that really show a progression of time, or maybe the lighting's just wrong, don't settle for it. It's okay to move on and go to another location that will yield those types of elements, because ultimately you want quality over quantity. When you are scouting for your location, bring a notebook or take notes on your phone to record the things that you see in the area and that you plan on filming. Check to see if there's a lot of wildlife in the area. Birds can be the #1 thing to ruin your time lapse, as they show up as like little tiny dust of specks in your shot, and it's honestly pretty annoying to get rid of. You can still shoot in those areas, but either plan to cut them out in post-production or use ultra-long shutter speeds to remove them from the shot altogether. If you're planning on filming in the city, the next thing to check out is foot traffic. How busy is the area that you're filming? Look to see if there's a lot of tourists in the area, especially if you're filming in a very notable spot or something with landmarks. The last thing you want to have happen is someone coming over to your time-lapse setup, touching it, messing around with it, or getting in front of the lens and basically just ultimately ruining the shot. You don't want that. This has happened to me so many times, and it's honestly, I just had to stop counting, but it's something that you definitely need to be aware of because it does happen quite often. When you are in the city, there can be a lot of variables that you need to take into account when setting up for your time-lapse shot. The first is, do I have permission to shoot here? Public property is the easiest to shoot from, and usually you can get away without being hassled by police or public officials. What you really have to make sure of, though, is that if you are shooting on private property, that you've obtained permission first or you have a permit. Otherwise, things can get hairy. You could possibly get ticketed, kicked out, or even charged with trespassing. We'll discuss how to obtain permits shortly. When you do find that perfect location, try visiting it during the time period you want to film. If you're not able to do that, make sure you come back with a sun tracking app so that you can see where the sun's going to be positioned when you start filming, so you can set up and adjust your composition accordingly. Lighting and understanding how the light's going to interact with your subject is absolutely critical when it comes to setting up your compositions, which we'll discuss in another chapter. There's a variety of apps in the App Store to do this. PhotoPills is my favorite, and it's honestly pretty cheap. It's also a great investment, so you can actually determine where the Milky Way is as well, and that's going to save you more time down the long run. This is crucial if you want to go out filming at night and you want to set up your composition before the sun goes down. My last tip for scouting is always to make sure you're prepared with the right gear and the right equipment. If you plan on shooting somewhere that might be windy, make sure to bring a sandbag to weigh down your tripod, or if you don't have a sandbag, make sure that your backpack is heavy enough that it could, hang or drape from your tripod. That's going to create more stability for your shot. I love using tripod hammocks myself because it allows you to weigh down the tripod using rocks or other elements in the scene. You can even use spare equipment that you may not be using, and that's going to also create really nice stability for your tripod and negate a lot of issues you might have with wind. If you're shooting in a location that you know the temperature is going to drop, invest in lens warmers or body warmers. This is going to prevent the lens from icing over or from having your batteries drain too quickly while you're out in the elements. This is super important if you're in an area that gets extremely cold like the mountains. Now let's talk about permitting. This can be a stressful task, and usually if you're working on a production, you'll have a locations manager that will go out and do all the heavy lifting for you. Obviously, that's not always the case for everyone, and you want to make sure that you do your due diligence when contacting property owners. The best way to do this is to go in person to the location that you want to film, and then you can ask to speak to the property manager and then propose your idea. Find a way that you can, make the situation work for both you and them. Maybe offer up content in exchange for a location. Show them some of your best work. Show them how you can help amplify their property, and see if they're open to allowing you to shoot. Most businesses will also require a COI, or a certificate of insurance, which I highly recommend investing in if you plan on doing this professionally. This will let the property manager know that you're insured and that you've done this before. If the property manager wants payment for the location, do your best to negotiate the lowest price possible. Many locations want tens of thousands of dollars, but if you explain the situation and what you want to do, make an offer that's maybe lower than what they're asking, and they still may allow you to shoot. If they can see that you're willing to work with them on the price, you may get it for much cheaper than you expected, or even get it for free, which is what we like. Another helpful tip is to make sure that the subjects that you're shooting aren't works of art created by other artists, because you'll need permission and releases for that as well. This also includes building architecture. One of the most iconic buildings in New York City, the Empire State Building, can't take up or be the center focus of your frame because it's architecturally trademarked. You can film it indirectly, but if it does take up more than 30%, I believe, of the screen, or is the main subject, you could be subject to fines. That's why it's always important to make sure that you know what you're filming before you start filming. The last helpful tip I can suggest when you're out scouting is to make sure you explore the entire area. Look around every turn, look high, look low. One of the issues I've always had in the past is I simply get too excited about an area or location I'm filming, and I set up in a spot that may be good, but not great. If you take the time to really investigate where you are and see what options you have available, you may end up finding even more exciting positions to film from, which is often the case. I also recommend bringing a camera with you, or even just your cell phone, and take pictures from the spots you want to shoot from so that you have a good idea of the framing once you come back to shoot. This helped me countless times on jobs and is especially vital if you're scouting for an actual client-driven production. Make sure you can take into account the entire scene. If you're filming at night, make sure that you know where the hottest light sources are, and make sure that you can anticipate what exposure you need to be at when you're filming. The worst thing to have happen when you're filming is to have a giant light turn on in your frame that you didn't know about, because this has happened to me many times before, and it's ultimately going to ruin your shot because the exposure changes so drastically. By scouting and taking the time to find the perfect location, you'll be setting yourself up for success and hopefully have an incredible shoot. That's going to wrap it up for this chapter. I'll see you in the next.